Hey everyone, it's Alex and welcome to this Marvel Snap OTA review. And quite honestly, this is a pretty chill one. Nothing crazy here. We got one specific deck at very high MMR that's getting nerfed, and then a bunch of maintenance buffs for cards that have seen almost no play whatsoever, and an actual very interesting buff to a recently released card, which I actually think is very fascinating, and we'll discuss that when we get there. But let's start with the nerfs here. And so Dagger is getting nerfs. Arana is going to get nerfed as well, but let's talk about this deck as a whole. This is referencing the move bounce based deck. Now, I featured it on the decks of the week a number of times over the last month or so. It even has been the #1 based deck according to Untapped based statistics. But generally speaking, it never had a crazy play rate. People just didn't play it that much, despite the win rates. Seeing a 4% meta share isn't absolutely crazy. 52% win rate is kind of low on the aggregate statistics, but I'm sure that at very high MMRs, the people that were playing it near constantly had very high win rates. And so, as the developers did note, they were kind of just like letting it ride out to see if it kind of sorted itself out. And that's why there were a couple decks where you would see something like a super giant specifically being teched in at high MMR in order to counteract the bounce-based mechanics of this shell, right? This is like the Frigga Beast move shell, right? And so they decided to attack some of the scalers. In particular, they wanted to attack Dagger and Human Torch. So Dagger goes from a 2-0 to a 2-2, which, I mean, is not a buff, because the major thing that Dagger did so well was this scaling power, the +3 to a +2. That's a massive nerf. And when Dagger got changed to a +3 power, we recognized the power potential here, especially as a 2 cost. And so this is a pretty big hit here. And I mean, the deck needed, I guess, to get attacked a little bit because it was maybe a little too disruptive at high MMRs. 99.9% of you guys don't care about this because very few people actually play move. And with regards to Arana, it's actually less about Arana, but as the developers have noted, it's the Human Torch. And Human Torch was being bounced back. It was being copied by Frigga. There was a lot of things happening with Human Torch and Dagger, which is why they're being targeted specifically. But you are getting a little bit of power on Arana, which is not insignificant for a 1 cost, but against the scaling power, the +2 turns to a +1, and that's a massive nerf, because when you hit something like a Human Torch, or, specifically it's Human Torch actually, obviously you're taking a lot off of that additional value, right? It still maintains some of the flexibility and be able to move it right. Some cards still might want that, but this is a pretty significant nerf. Once again, on aggregate, you're only looking at a 4% meta share according to Untapped, and a win rate that's pretty low. This is probably because if you're someone who saw the deck was performing very well and just decided to pick it up and just kind of let it rip for a couple sessions, your win rate was probably suffering until you kind of got the mechanics down, you kind of got the play patterns down, the turn order. So I guess it was one of those situations where the people that really played this deck at high MMRs, at high skill levels, it was warping the meta for those particular people. And then now as a result, these cards take, they catch a couple strays for the rest of the player base, which I don't think is a big deal because very few people were playing them anyways. So that's where I guess the developers' heads are at there. Now, I actually like this change a lot. Anytime you're buffing Series 1, 2, and 3 cards, I'm all for it. Now, Spectrum, it's going to get a little bit of help in the upcoming seasons. We do have some ongoing synergy, I know, that we're going to be discussing in like kind of highlight videos and Snapchat stuff like that as well. But so seeing Spectrum get a little bit of love, I think, is nice. It's always felt like it underperformed a little bit. And this is actually reverting a prior nerf. Like, Spectrum was a 6-7, and then it got brought down to a 6-6. And I actually can't remember what the card is that came out that spurred them to nerf her back down. Someone in the comments, I'm sure, will remember. But Spectrum was a 6-7, and they got brought down to 6-6 because there was a new card that came out, and they're like, we're going to just make sure this doesn't break anything. And so, obviously, Spectrum can kind of go back up, and I can foresee Spectrum staying here. Now, with Spectrum's ability, I think the major thing you want to consider is that inexpensive ongoing cards disproportionately benefit from that +2 power. And so things like, the Gooses and the Ant-Mans and all those types of things, even like Colossus, like you want those cheaper cards because each one of them gets +2 power. Whereas like a 5-drop or a 6-drop, well, I don't know you'd be playing a 6-drop necessarily, but they don't get as much from that +2 power. Obviously, Iron Man's a little different. Iron Man gets the double up, but at the end of the day, Spectrum loves those less expensive ongoing cards, and we might be getting some of that. And so hopefully this win rate in the meta share does change, but Spectrum is still in a very much a prove it state with regards to the meta. Now, Namora is a little sad because with Namora, I think this is actually functionally a good card. I think this is a great buff. I think this is going to be a very legitimate card now. Whoops, my bad. We're going the wrong way there. Very legitimate card as a 5-7 that does the power output that it does. The challenge with Namora, I think, is twofold. One, you have junk and stuff like that has been relevant. Two, it is a difficult thing to pull off because your opponent can most certainly kind of impact your board state in the current meta relatively easily. But also, I think people have just kind of forgotten about it. And I will tell you that we didn't see, and the developers did drop a note here about Penny Parker being aimed to give the Namora decks some synergy. And we didn't really see much of the Namora Penny Parker. So I wonder if this is Glenn's way of saying like, hey noobs, you missed the spot. You know what I mean? And so I wonder if this buff plus the kind of hint of, hey, you should be trying Penny Parker more often. Maybe they kind of came across something internally that was far outperforming what we had found by our own means, per se, right? So anyways, Namora, 44% win rate, 1% meta share. I don't think it's a bad card. I think it's just people aren't playing it right now because this is not the right time for Namora. So we'll see if this is enough to kind of spur some additional creation and some new ideas with the card. Because, I mean, it has been traditionally a very good card. It's just the meta hasn't been right all the time for her. Then we have Leader. I'm not sure if I want Leader back. Like, this is kind of one of those cards that, like, anybody that that was playing when Leader was literally dominating the meta would be like, you know what, yeah, like, that was not fun. Like, I don't know if I want Leader to be a legit card anymore or whatever. Obviously, it's heavily nerfed compared to what it was before. Do you remember it bringing back, like, everything, right? It was kind of crazy what it used to do, but it's running a 36% win rate, and literally no one plays it at all. Like, no one plays this card at all. And so it's, I guess with Snap, like, you want each card to at least carry its own weight. You want it to be playable. And so Leader needed something, I guess. I don't think one power really brings it back necessarily, but it's a good place to start. It's just still not a card that you're like, I need a good 6-drop. I'll add Leader. Like, Leader doesn't fit any existing shells right now. So we'll have to see if that changes at all. But right now, Leader, a little underwhelming. This is a very easy buff that honestly will probably ultimately do nothing. And we go Sandman here. You know, statistically, Sandman's still running almost a 52% win rate. The meta share is not that high. Honestly, I think it's like an issue with the actual text. I don't think the card's fun to play at all. I was thinking about Sandman a lot. Now, I know the old version of Sandman was really restrictive and it was problematic from a meta, but I actually almost prefer it over this. And not because I don't like playing my cards. I think that the new Sandman is just awkward enough that it's lost its identity. I actually prefer the old Sandman better. Now, the problem with the old Sandman is now we have stuff like Doom 2099, which would feast because of the old Sandman. So I think Doom 2099's design perhaps might make this existing Sandman a little trickier to play, or the old Sandman trickier to play, because now that deck becomes absolutely insane. So I actually don't think that Sandman getting power is necessarily the solution here. I almost wonder if they need to go back to the drawing board about what Sandman's identity actually is, because if you want him to be a disruptive release valve, you had move bounce going off in the meta. You just nerfed that deck, and Sandman was not used to counter it. It was super giant, ironically, at the high end of the meta. So it's kind of funny to think that Sandman was literally not chosen to do the task he was designed for. And I think it might be the text. Let's see if the additional power does help out. 5/8 is not insignificant, so we'll see if this does anything, but I still think that Sandman has a little bit of an identity crisis. Miss Marvel. This is a good change. The reason why is because currently in the spotlight caches, so if you pulled Miss Marvel and you're like, no, this card sucks, and you might feel a little better with pulling her now, but this doesn't really change her. If anything, I wonder about Miss Marvel, because, you know, she obviously does not work with Moonstone, unless you do some fancy pants stuff with Mystique, and that's a whole different conversation. But Miss Marvel is not going to work with Moonstone, and Moonstone's currently the avenue that a lot of like these ongoing decks are trying to approach. You still have the condition of the +2 cards, no repeating cost, which can be difficult, especially with you know, junk being what it is. I don't know if one power does it for her, because the text is so much more restrictive than it used to be at launch. And obviously we don't want Miss Marvel at launch back again, right? Despite, honestly, having Echo in the game, Rogue, and all the counters we have for ongoing, Miss Marvel still represented a little too much power in its original design. But I'm not sure if this does it yet. I still think the cost is too restrictive. The ongoing ability conditions are too restrictive. And I almost wonder if an increase in cost for the old power or value back, like think about what like Namora is, make her like a 5-something and reduce the complexity of the requirement to kind of get that power out there. I don't know. I don't want Miss Marvel running rampant either, but at the same time, a literally less than 1% meta share and a 31% win rate. Like, it needed something, so I guess this is pretty straightforward. This is super interesting. Luna Snow came out and honestly was mid, very mid. Wasn't a bad card though. Was not a bad card, just wasn't a good card. And in Marvel Snap, when you have 12 cards in a deck, every card has to really pull its weight. And so this was easily the 13th card in every single shell I tested it in. I thought there was a chance that in high Evo, this card could have been legit. And we even got Bruce Banner, but that card ended up being a complete disaster, which didn't help high Evo at all. But Luna Snow, I'm looking at this stat line of a 3/6. That is a lot. That's actually a lot. It is beyond premium now. And when you consider that for a second, that the ability is like not that bad. Like, yes, it's reciprocated, and that reciprocation is often like unwanted, right? Like the crystal effect. We still have that ice cube joining both sides of the locations, but now you have a 3/6. What are they playing on turn 3 that outpaces your 3/6 Luna Snow? Like, there's very few things that can do that outside of Zabu 4 costs and stuff like that. Like, feel free to let me know in the comments the wide list of things that are better than a 3/6 Luna Snow on turn 3. But what I'm trying to say is, though, this is a very legit curve play. And you get the ramp. And if your deck is specifically designed to take advantage of that ramp, something like a high Evo or whatever have you, then suddenly Luna Snow starts to make a lot more sense. I'm actually excited for this change. And this is kind of risky territory. I don't think they've released, like they've said it's uncommon to release a 3/6. Like a 3/6 with an ability that's often an upside. This is a lot. Like, I don't know. This is kind of crazy, but I'm excited to actually test this for those of us that have Luna Snow. A lot of people might, here's the thing though, a lot of people might have like skipped the cash because Luna Snow was underwhelming, and now you're like, huh, I'm not going to spend 6k tokens on Luna Snow, and she's obviously not in caches anymore. And it's kind of one of the challenges of the system that we currently have, right? So anyways, I'm interested in this change. I think I'm going to be testing some stuff for Luna Snow. I like this quite a bit. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Quite a much more straightforward OTA this week, but that's okay. I like straightforward sometimes. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on that next one.